Formula One is built on glory, but behind every victory lies an evil shadow. A world where the pursuit of speed has taken lives, broken bodies, and rewritten destinies. From Niki Lauda's horrific fire accident to the overlooked case of Jos Verstappen's domestic violence, Formula One's greatest moments were often born from its darkest hours. Every triumph hides a painful cost. Every champion has a secret scar. These are F1's darkest stories, the ones the sport doesn't want you to know. Michael Schumacher, the champion behind closed doors, 7 world titles, 91 wins, then a family ski trip in the French Alps on December 29, 2013. Michael Schumacher struck a rock, then another. Even with a helmet, the head trauma was catastrophic. Surgeons fought to stabilize him, a medically induced coma, months in hospital, silence. Since then, almost nothing has been public. No photos, no detailed updates. A tight circle protects him at home in Switzerland, while specialists continue his care. Now and then, a trusted voice lets slip a sliver. He watches races. Communication is limited, but the truth stays behind a wall built by love and privacy. For fans, it's whiplash, the most relentless driver of his era, gone from the spotlight overnight. For his family, it's the weight of a legend carried in quiet rooms, his son Mick chasing the same dream without his father at the fence. Schumacher's story isn't a finish line. It's a long, private straight. The man who defined control now lives in a place where the sport can't help him, and the world waits still. Felipe Massa, the spring that shattered a dream. Felipe Massa was on the rise. The 2008 season had ended in heartbreak, a title lost by a single point, but in 2009 he was ready to fight back. During qualifying at the Hungarian Grand Prix, he was pushing for pole, right on the edge where champions live. Then, in a split second, everything changed. A loose suspension spring from another car flew through the air like a bullet, striking Massa's helmet at nearly 160 miles per hour. The impact was devastating. He lost consciousness instantly, the car crashing head-on into the barriers. Surgeons fought to save his life as the world watched in shock. Massa survived, but something was taken from him that day. The recovery was long, the fear lingering. He returned to racing, determined, brave, yet never quite the same. The what if followed him, the titles that slipped away, the future that could have been. One stray piece of metal ended a dream and reshaped Formula One's safety forever. A reminder that in this sport, even the smallest failure can change everything. Massa, however, returned. Sometimes the hardest race is the one fought far from the track and may lead to no return. From hidden battles to shattered legs, Didier Pironi's story was a tragedy written at full speed. Didier Pironi, from Villeneuve's rival to a fatal obsession. In 1982, Didier Pironi was leading the Formula One World Championship for Ferrari, but his season came to a brutal end at Hockenheim. In soaked conditions with zero visibility, Pironi plowed into the back of Alain Prost's Renault. His Ferrari launched into the air and came crashing down, shattering both his legs. More than 40 surgeries later, his career was over. Just months before, Pironi's teammate Gilles Villeneuve had died after their infamous fallout at Imola. Fans saw Pironi's crash as karma, and his reputation never recovered. Unable to race cars again, he turned to powerboats. 5 years later, in 1987, his boat flipped in a high-speed accident off the Isle of Wight. Pironi was killed instantly, along with 2 crew members. He left behind a pregnant partner, who later named their twins, Didier and Gilles. The champion that might have been never got his chance. But he wasn't the only one who stared death in the face. Niki Lauda, the man who refused to die. At the 1976 German Grand Prix, Niki Lauda's Ferrari snapped into the barriers and exploded into flames. He was trapped inside for almost a minute. By the time fellow drivers pulled him out, his face was burned, his lungs destroyed, and doctors read him his last rites. 6 weeks later, he was back in the cockpit. His wounds hadn't healed, his bandages soaked with blood under his helmet, but he still raced, finishing fourth at Monza. That comeback became one of the greatest acts of defiance in sporting history. Lauda went on to win 2 more world championships, but the crash never stopped haunting him. Years later, he required multiple organ transplants before finally passing in 2019. His survival in '76 was miraculous, but it came at a cost he carried for the rest of his life. Tragedy didn't only come in flames, sometimes it led to death. Ayrton Senna, the death that changed F1 forever. On May 1st, 1994, the world of motorsport stood still. Ayrton Senna, 3-time world champion and widely considered one of the greatest drivers of all time, was leading at the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola. Just 7 laps into the race, his Williams car veered off track at Tamburello and smashed into a concrete wall at over 130 miles per hour. The impact was catastrophic. A piece of suspension pierced his helmet, causing fatal head injuries. Millions of fans in Brazil and across the globe watched live as their hero's life was taken in front of them. His funeral drew 3 million mourners to the streets of Sao Paulo, a national outpouring of grief few athletes in history have ever received. Senna's death didn't just end a career, it changed Formula One forever. The FIA immediately began a sweeping overhaul of safety, mandating cockpit redesigns, higher crash standards, and new medical response systems. In the decades since, those changes have saved countless lives. But for Brazil, and for the sport, Senna's passing was a wound that never fully healed. Senna's tragedy was supposed to be the last. The sport swore it had learned its lesson. But 15 years later, the unthinkable happened again. Robert Kubica, the career that almost was. Robert Kubica was on the verge of joining a top team when everything fell apart. In February 2011, while rallying in Italy, he lost control and slammed into a guardrail. The metal barrier pierced the cockpit, nearly severing his right arm and breaking multiple bones. Doctors fought for hours to save his life, but the damage ended his Formula One career just as it was about to peak. Kubica's determination never wavered, though. After 8 years of surgeries and rehab, he returned to the grid with Williams in 2019. The car was hopeless, but Kubica still dragged it to a single-point finish, proof that he had refused to quit. His story became less about what was lost and more about resilience. The driver who should have fought for championships instead inspired the sport by showing the strength to come back when everyone else counted him out. Kubica returned. Others were never given that chance. Jos Verstappen, the father, the fury, and the shadow. Behind a champion, Jos Verstappen should have been remembered for his time at Benetton. The raw speed, the podiums, the flashes of brilliance that made people believe he could be next in line for greatness. Instead, his name became a different kind of headline. Away from the track, the same aggression that made him fast turned self-destructive. In 1998, a fight at a karting track in Belgium left a man with a fractured skull. Years later came assault charges, restraining orders, and even an alleged attempt to run down an ex-girlfriend with his car. He spent time behind bars while his son Max was still a teenager, visiting a father who once ruled the paddock, now locked away behind glass. Jos's reputation spiraled from rising star to cautionary tale. His fierce temper, once an advantage in racing, became his downfall in life. And yet, through that chaos, he shaped the next generation, molding Max with the same relentless fire that nearly destroyed him. Jos Verstappen never won a world championship, but his shadow looms over the one his son built. A legacy of speed, discipline, and danger. Proof that sometimes the darkest stories don't end in flames, but in the echoes they leave behind. But while some drivers lost control of their lives, others lost control of their dreams. Alain Prost, the professor who failed his own formula. Alain Prost was known for precision, the professor of Formula One, 4-time world champion, master tactician, and one of the sport's sharpest minds. But when he left the cockpit to build his own team, the brilliance that once defined him began to unravel. In 1997, Prost Grand Prix entered the grid, a French dream built on pride and ambition. Yet from the start, everything went wrong. Unreliable cars, broken engines, and financial chaos turned promise into panic. Prost's partnership with Peugeot soured, sponsors fled, and by 2001, the team was drowning in debt. Staff went unpaid. Equipment was auctioned off. The man who once outsmarted Senna couldn't outmaneuver bankruptcy. For a driver celebrated for control, watching his creation collapse was a humiliation no crash could equal. The professor who calculated every move on track misjudged the business of Formula One and lost millions learning the lesson. Prost's downfall wasn't written in smoke or speed, but in silence, the quiet unraveling of a genius who thought he could master everything. And for Lewis Hamilton, mastery brought its own kind of pain, a battle that no victory could silence. Lewis Hamilton, the invisible battle. Lewis Hamilton's career looks like perfection on paper. 7 world titles, more wins than anyone in history. But behind the victories lay battles that couldn't be seen on track. As a mixed-race kid growing up in Stevenage, Hamilton faced racism and bullying from the start. He carried those scars into karting, where his dad pushed him to be perfect against a world that often wasn't welcoming. The pressure was immense. Even as he rose to the top, becoming the youngest champion in 2008, the struggles didn't disappear. Hamilton later admitted he battled depression and loneliness for years. In 2021, after losing the title in the controversial Abu Dhabi finale, he disappeared from the spotlight altogether, a silent cry for help. Yet Hamilton chose openness. He used his platform to talk about mental health and racism, inspiring others to share their own struggles. For him, the darkness wasn't just about survival. It was about making sure the next generation of drivers wouldn't feel as alone. Sir Lewis Hamilton's story proves that even the brightest stars in Formula One fight battles far away from the roar of engines. Tragedy sometimes could also lead to one being champion, but never gets to celebrate the triumph. Jochen Rindt, the champion who never celebrated. Jochen Rindt was electric. Fearless, fast and flamboyant, the Austrian was becoming the new face of Formula One in the late 1960s. By 1970, driving for Lotus, he was the man to beat. His aggressive, elbows-out style made him a fan favorite, and that season he racked up 5 wins in a row. The title was his for the taking. But at Monza, in qualifying for the Italian Grand Prix, disaster struck. Rindt's Lotus 72 snapped out of control under braking. The barriers were unforgiving, the car folded, and Rindt suffered fatal injuries. He was just 28. The season carried on, but no one caught his points tally. That November, Jochen Rindt was officially crowned world champion, the only driver in history to receive the title posthumously. His widow, Nina Rindt, accepted the trophy in his place, in what remains one of the most heartbreaking podium moments in F1 history. Rindt's death left a lasting mark. He was gone too soon, but his name etched itself in history as proof of how cruelly the sport can twist fate. Rindt's loss showed how fate could steal a champion at his peak, but other times bad news strikes before a career even has the chance to begin. Henry Surtees, a legacy cut short. Henry Surtees, son of 1964 world champion John Surtees, seemed destined to carry on the family's legendary name, but in July 2009, during a Formula 2 race at Brands Hatch, tragedy struck in the most horrifying way. A wheel from another car broke loose and bounced across the track. In a cruel twist of fate, it struck Henry on the head, knocking him unconscious instantly. His car then crashed into the barriers, with Henry unable to react. The 18-year-old's accident devastated not only his family, but the entire motorsport community. For John Surtees, who had lived through the dangers of F1's deadliest era, losing his son in such a freak incident was a cruel irony. Henry's death reignited debates about head protection in motorsport, with innovations like the Halo system years later serving as a long overdue answer. Henry Surtees never got the chance to show what he could become. His story is a haunting reminder that sometimes it isn't speed or risk-taking, but sheer bad luck that steals futures in racing. Surtees' death was a cruel twist of luck, but for Elio De Angelis, it wasn't luck at all. It was a system that failed him when he needed it most. Elio De Angelis, the gentleman who died in silence. Elio De Angelis was different. Known as one of F1's true gentlemen, he was admired as much for his kindness as for his skill. A gifted pianist, an aristocrat by birth, and a steady hand on the wheel, Elio never chased fame, but he earned respect everywhere he went. In 1986, after moving from Lotus to Brabham, he took part in a routine test at Paul Ricard in France. It was supposed to be just another day. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. His car crashed due to a rear wing failure, but the impact wasn't instantly fatal. Elio was trapped in the wreck as flames spread. The tragedy wasn't the crash, it was the response. Safety crews were slow to arrive, and the equipment was inadequate. By the time they freed him, the smoke had done its damage. Elio died of asphyxiation. He was 28. For many, De Angelis' death was a chilling reminder. Formula One wasn't just about dangerous crashes, but about whether help arrived fast enough. His loss spurred new calls for better safety standards during testing, not just races. Elio De Angelis left behind not just statistics, but memories of a driver who raced with grace and died because the sport failed him when he needed it most. Formula One may dazzle us with speed, glamour, and champagne showers, but beneath it all lies a history written in heartbreak, from champions who never got to celebrate, to heroes taken far too soon, to drivers broken by the very sport they gave everything to. F1's dark side is always there, lurking in the shadows of the podium. These stories remind us that every lap comes with risk, every trophy with sacrifice. The price of glory isn't just measured in wins, but in lives forever changed. And now I want to hear from you. Which of these stories shook you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more untold stories from the world of Formula One, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Because behind every race, there's always a story they don't want you to know.